Welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name is, of course, Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about WoW Classic Hardcore in 2024. Now, it's been a little while since I've talked about WoW in general, and even I think a bit longer since I've talked about the WoW Classic or Classic Hardcore servers. But since so many people have been joining back into the hardcore experience over the last few weeks, I've wanted to talk about my own hardcore journey over the past year. So, yes, this is not on the fresh servers. This is a character I started back when the initial, official hardcore servers launched for Vanilla WoW. And it's something I've been doing in the background. I haven't really made many videos about it, and it's something that it's been kind of an escape for me, really. It's been my MMO that I go to relax in, which is very weird because that doesn't necessarily jive with hardcore. But I wanted to make a video talking about what I think is the best single journey you can make in any MMORPG. And it's a journey that I've never made before because I joined World of Warcraft in Wrath of the Lich King, kind of the ICC patch, which I think is when they had the most players, and a lot of people clearly were joining the game at that point. But I never experienced the true vanilla aspect of WoW. And is when obviously the vanilla servers officially launched so many years ago. I did try the game then, but I found it too slow for me. I was used to retail, and I kind of got to level 10 or 15, and I wasn't having enough fun. I was kind of getting bored of the gameplay loop at that point. However, when I tried Hardcore Classic, when that launched, I was hooked. And the reason for this is really simple, kind of looking back at it, but I didn't really realize it would be the case until it happened. But you have the very slow, methodical process of Classic WoW where everything you do feels like such an achievement, but is slow, paired with this hardcore nature where death is final. And all of a sudden, all these very slow fights, these slow quests, this exploration has stakes through the roof, which is such a nice combination of things where you're engaged the entire time, but it doesn't feel like you're rushing through things. And to me, that made for the most epic journey going from level 1 to 60 on my human pally. What are some of the things I enjoyed the most about it? Well, this essentially I wanted to break those down in this video. I don't know what the true, I don't want to list this in what I think the best thing is versus the worst, but here are some of the things that I really found inspiring over this time. I think the biggest thing is the progression that you feel on your character. And this is something that I think a lot of MMOs have lost over time. When you play retail WoW, there's such a weird progression chain where you go from, even let's talk about the War Within. There was this really weird situation where, low level, people coming out of Dragonflight were sought after to have in groups because you progressively got weaker as you leveled throughout the expansion, which is an absolute crazy thing when you go back and think about what progression in an MMO should feel like. Obviously, Classic WoW, there's no expansions or anything happening there. It's the initial journey that the developers wanted. But with that, you get this true feeling that every single level, every single talent point, every single item that you get from a quest feels like such a massive upgrade. It feels like, hey, I can now go and take that monster on that I was kind of scared of before. And you're quite scared of them in hardcore. So it really feels impactful when that happens. And I think it was just that juxtaposition between those two experiences that really made me appreciate the progression of characters in Classic. Now, the biggest thing, apart from that, is the exploration. The fact that World of Warcraft launched with this massive of a map is truly surprise. I don't even know what to do with that information, because I joined in Wrath of the Lich King, and you kind of assume that things were added over time and stuff like that. And obviously, different expansion areas were added. But what launched with the vanilla game of WoW, when you compare to any MMO launch these days, is jaw-dropping. It's completely... It's one of the reasons that it could not be dethroned. It's such a large amount of content, and you're encouraged to explore so much of it, particularly on hardcore, because not only do you want to do, a lot of quests, but you want to make sure you're doing lower level quests. And that kind of encourages you to go through a starting zone and then go to another starting zone of your faction to do those quests before pushing on into a higher level zone. And that's kind of a method I used a lot throughout the journey where, there's often a couple zones that are for a specific level range, and I would do the easier section of that zone first, and then do all of those zones, and then do the harder section of those zones. And it was really such a great experience being able to try these different areas. Quests themselves encourage you to go to different capital cities, to go to different continents. The travel between continents is like, I when going into Classic, had no idea of the different, boat routes and different paths to get to different areas. And now I know, exactly the quickest way to get from one corner of the map to the other corner, which I think is such a fun thing to know. And it was something that was very challenging and kind of an accomplishment in itself. I think a lot of players are familiar with certain walks, like the walk from Ironforge into the wetlands to get to the boat to go to the Night Elf zone and stuff like that. Like there's some very key moments because it's filled with danger. There's crocodiles roaming around that are just waiting to end your life. So it's such an interesting thing to see that way. And then obviously there is the higher level zones. So I played again in Wrath of the Lich King, and kind of with the XP curves and the dungeons you do, the dungeon finder eventually, you often didn't play a lot of the high level classic WoW zones. You do a lot of the starter zones, the West Falls, the around Ironforge area. I've had lots of experience there, and I loved playing them again in Classic. But I had never been to Winterspring in my entire life. I didn't know that there was another snowy high-level zone that existed. And going through that zone and seeing different areas and having the wintry vibes at a high level was such a rewarding experience. I really liked, going through that, through Fellwood. There was a bunch of different zones that I just hadn't done as a player that was so much fun. And then lastly, and I think a lot of people kind of will talk about this, but the community, right? That's such a big part of Classic WoW in general, but the hardcore community is so special. Seeing people congratulate people who get to level 60 in the chat, seeing people pay respect or put their F in chat for people who die, specifically those at higher levels. Or people who call out people who die in silly or ridiculous ways, is such it makes the game feel alive whenever you're in it, right? You're seeing people chat about things that are happening in the world around you, which is such a cornerstone of MMOs and something that I think is lost in a lot of the, and end game experiences of retail MMOs and stuff like that. Obviously finding a guild, I'm a player who does very little with guilds, but I liked finding a guild just to have a group of people that I saw chatting about current events and stuff like that, people that I could ask questions to, because the one thing you'll learn throughout your exploration is that not all quests or monsters are made the same. And, there's some add-ons that you can get that will highlight some red areas on your map. But if you're ever curious, it's always great to ask, should I be going into this cave to go do this quest from this kobold? Is it worth it to go down this deep corridor and get, ambushed? There's so many things that can happen and people have done and died from before. So being able to have these wealths of knowledge, and people are always so, willing to share their experiences with new players, I think, too, in Classic, and especially hardcore. It's really heartwarming to see. And then there's also the world buffs. That's such a system that I've never interacted with. And for a while, I didn't really even understand what it meant when I saw people in the chat saying, hey, I'm teleporting people to get the world buffs here and stuff like that. And eventually I just happened to be in Booty Bay when the buffs were going out, and I got this buff on my character for 2 hours, and I was like, this is crazy good. This buff will allow me to do quests that I was scared of. So then making it, a priority when I see buffs are going to happen, to travel across the world just to get this buff, just to come back and do specific challenging things that I was scared of doing. And you see everyone kind of doing the same thing. You see low levels there. You see high levels getting it for their runs of stuff. It's just such a great way to see the community coming together. And really like, drives that, idea that one day maybe you'll be the reason these buffs are going out, which is such a cool thing to aspire to as well. And having that, impact on the entire world with the actions you do in the game, which again, I think is something that's often lost in a lot of these higher, or these more modern MMOs, which I think is really cool to see. The other thing with this is that consumables at low levels are not necessarily essential, but things that people want. You want to have your sharpening stone, your potions on, even for the lowest level of them, to help you survive things. And that keeps, professions at those lower levels engaged. Whereas I think in a lot of situations, people would kind of just skip getting any of those consumables at a low level because you're gonna go past it, and it doesn't really matter if you're not as strong as you could possibly be. So all of those different things really made such an incredible experience. And it's, looking back at it, taking my time to complete it, there were moments that stand out, specifically near-death experiences that, your heart is just pumping, which there's so little in gaming that I think actually makes me, visibly shake. But when you almost lose a hardcore character at a high level, it is absolutely terrifying to have happen. And specifically, the whole last level from 59 to 60, it was no different than 58 to 59 or whatever, but I was so focused on not losing this all. This is my first character that's ever going to hit 60. And I was just so scared every moment of that last level. But when you finally do get to the end of the journey and look back at everything, it was such a rewarding experience. I think if you're someone who's ever been curious about playing hardcore, this is the time to do it. This is the time to try it out. If you've been looking for a new, a new game to give a go, or if you are a veteran of WoW and haven't done the hardcore playthrough, it is such a rewarding experience when you do get to the end, and it's such a rewarding experience throughout the whole journey. But yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on it. This video has been a long, long journey to get to, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on the hardcore experience. But hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'll talk to you in the next one. Thanks for watching.